Okay, everybody, welcome back to class, and I hope everything's going well for you today. If you need some help, reach out for it. You can ask me, reach out to Eric or Jay, and if everything's going really well for you, great. And if you got any tips for us about how to make this successful, uh, please let us know. I leave it in the comments, but I turn the comments off because I don't want anybody random telling me what to do. But you can find a way to do it through email or something else. All right. I'm going to move forward, and I'm excited because I figured out how to use the hotkeys to switch screens, and so you're going to see me doing all kinds of fun stuff today as I switch back and forth between the different screens. But let me leave it here for a minute so we can talk about our topic for today. We're going to talk about behavior, and we're going to talk about how thinking about behavior from an evolutionary perspective helps us understand the way animals behave. We're also going to think about how scientists have learned about behavior. We're going to focus on the work of Jane Goodall, which I'm excited about. She's a hero, and I'll talk more about her in a minute. And then we're going to finish up with understanding the proximate and ultimate causes of behavior in Thimbergen's 4 questions. I've never heard his name actually pronounced, but that's how I would pronounce it if I was him. So we're going to switch now to the lecture. So get yourself ready to take some notes. All right. So before I get going, I got this slide out there. I just want to remind you real quick. I know I keep going over and over, but I actually used this slide last year just for normal life, and now it's a good idea to just remind yourself that you do have the potential to be successful. So keep at it. You will be successful. Everybody struggles. Ask for help. How many times have I said that? Build relationships. Be that person for your family, but more importantly for yourself. And the time is now to really get it together and make things happen. All right, I'm going to keep going. So, along those lines and where we currently are, I've got this quote from Jane Goodall that you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. All right, and I think that's profound, but I'm just going to say very concretely, the kind of difference you can make is to stay home. Don't leave your house unless you absolutely have to. Don't hang out with people unless you absolutely have to. We all need you to do that. So that's the kind of difference you need to make is stay home right now. All right, I know it's hard, but we have to do it. All right, so Jane Goodall was an ethologist from Britain. She is full Dame Jane Goodall. And what makes her an ethologist is that she studies behavior. And she really focused her research on the Gombe National Park in Tanzania and studying the behavior of chimpanzees. One of the things that she brought to the situation was, up until that point, scientists were all men, European men, white men of European descent for the most part, were studying chimpanzee behavior in zoos. And she said we have to go to their environment, we have to study them. And one of the other things that she did was she interacted with the chimpanzees, which at that point was taboo. She learned a lot more about chimpanzee behavior than people had ever known, and realized that a lot of the behaviors that people were seeing in zoos actually weren't really normal behaviors. And she found out some really fascinating things about chimpanzee culture and their behavior through her observational and participatory research style. So one of the things that I think is really interesting that she found is that chimps are not strictly vegetarian. They make and use tools, and they have a developed social structure, right? And so you can take some time to look into her work a little bit more. But she's still alive and still doing research and still a leading scientist in both animal behavior, but just overall in biology. So before you go on to talk about her and learn a little bit more about her, let's talk about what behavior is, right? So at the very basic description, a behavior is an active interaction between animals and their environment, right? So it can be similar species, different species, or the physical environment, right? And so that's where we're moving into ecology, and ecology is about the relationship animals have with their environment. This is a good place to start because it's about how the individual works within the environment, right? And so behavior is a change in activity based on both external and internal stimuli, right? So nervous system, endocrine system acting to produce signals that cause an animal to do something, right? Usually behaviors are adaptive and increase fitness, right? So we have to ask, if something does something, if there's a behavior, then what does it do to help it get food or avoid being food or reproduce, right? Before break, we talked a little bit about addictive behaviors. I just briefly mentioned it, but that's kind of where there are behaviors that have been beneficial in the past, but have the potential to be maladaptive and decrease fitness. So it's just something to think about. All right. So we can split behavior into two different categories. We have our innate behaviors, things that are within our genetics, right? So our morphology determines what behaviors are possible. I like thinking about talking is that we have organs that allow us to talk, and there's also, like I mentioned, the endocrine and nervous system that drive our behaviors and change our behaviors. And it's helpful to think of that some of the behaviors that we have are not things that we're deciding to do, but things that are driven by the hormones that are being produced in our body. Some of the research into males is that adolescent males take more risks than adolescent females, and they believe there's some sort of endocrine reason for that. The other source of behavior are learned behaviors, and these are things that you either figure out for yourself. So that's really interesting to think about, that every learned behavior, there was one individual or group of individuals somewhere that figured out they could do that and then pass that down. And so social behaviors are learned from others. So everything that we know how to do that is not innate, we have learned from somebody else. And I think that's really fascinating as well. So innate behaviors can be divided into two different categories. There are reflexes, which are automatic responses to a stimulus, right? Pulling away from heat, jumping at a loud noise. Those are things that just happen because a signal is sent that says this is not good, and react to it. Instinctual behaviors are a little more complex and really fascinating to people because they're things that individuals are born knowing how to do, like building a nest. Nobody has to teach a bird how to build a nest. Suckling is nobody has to teach a young mammal how to suckle. Returning to the sea in that picture with the turtle is an instinctual behavior. And so those are really fascinating because it's trying to figure out what sort of signals the individual is getting and where in the DNA it's telling them that's what they should do. All right, here's some more innate behaviors. Now, learned behavior are really interesting, and then I keep saying all this is interesting, but I'm trying to train a dog right now, and so we're going through this process of associative learning, right? Associate a stimulus with a consequence. But we all do this. And, there's operant conditioning, a lot about it's trial and error, and the behavior reward. But then there's also the classical conditioning, Pavlov, ring a bell, dog salivates because it thinks it's going to get food, right? All right. So now I want to switch to the Tinbergen's 4 questions about behavior, right? So when trying to figure out an animal's behavior, we can think about it in these 4 ways, 4 categories, right? So what's the mechanism? What triggers the behavior? How does the behavior work, right? What causes it? What's the adaptive value or function of the behavior? Why does it happen? What is the advantage of the behavior? What's the ontogeny of the behavior? So what are the steps, and how do individuals change over time, and how does their behavior change over time? And then we've got phylogeny. How did this behavior evolve? What are the evolutionary steps that brought us to the behavior that we're seeing? All right. And so we can divide these things up into proximate and ultimate causes of behavior, right? Proximate and ultimate causes of behavior. So we've got the cause, simple explanation, closest to the event are the proximate causes of the behavior, right? Ultimate would be the effect. You have to think about why this behavior is important, and it's the real reason that these behaviors exist. And if you want to practice at thinking about proximate versus ultimate causes, the 5 Why protocol is an interesting thing to do. You just sit and you say, why is something happening? And then you take your answer. Why is that happening? Why is that happening? Do it. Look it up. You can figure it out on your own. Okay. So here's some different examples to help you better understand the proximate causes of behavior, right? So the mechanisms of the behavior, how does the behavior work, is a proximate cause of behavior, right? So we've got the environmental stimulus, trying to understand what triggers the behavior, what happens in the brain or in the body that makes that behavior possible, and then what about the morphology and anatomy of the behavior allow it to happen. Take a minute to watch this Bowerbird video when you get a chance. All right, next one is ontogeny, right? How does the behavior develop in the individual? So there's some sort of genetic basis, but there are also individual influences or environmental influences, and this can change as an individual develops. So there are things you can do now that you weren't able to do when you were younger, and that constitutes an ontogeny in development of behavior. All right, now we'll switch to the ultimate causes of behavior, right? So what's the adaptive value of it, right? So why is this behavior beneficial? The answer should be that it leads to increased fitness, right? And so that's an idea that there's currency. So the more, the better off that behavior is at making your life better, bigger the payoff, right? And you need a positive return on investment. So you shouldn't do anything that you costs more than you're going to get, right? And it's back to this: get food, don't get eaten, don't let the environment get you either, so don't freeze to death, and reproduce. And this is a really interesting one for you to think about, that these are bacteria that are attracted to a sugar crystal, chemotaxis. So why is that beneficial to the bacteria? All right, and finally, we've got phylogeny. So how did the behavior evolve? And this is a really cool example. We talked about the anal lizards earlier this semester. This is phylogeny showing how their head bobbing behavior has evolved. They each have a different pattern, and it's all evolved from that original head bobbing pattern that you can see at the bottom, Anocarolensis, right? So again, back to the idea: return on investment, strategies that maximize benefit and minimize cost. That's an important thing. And always remembering that behavioral fitness is related to the environment you find yourself in. These behaviors for anal lizards work when they're living in the tropics, but put in a different environment, they wouldn't be adaptive behaviors. Okay, so that's an introduction to biology, or the ecology of behavior. And here's your to-do list. You're going to need to read chapter 43.1. You are 43.1, 43.2, and 43.3. And I highly recommend that you do all of those and the rest of the chapter if you have the time. Also take time to watch the videos in the slideshow, the 4 examples of proximate and ultimate causes, and get your head around the idea of proximate and ultimate causes. And then you'll find on my courses there is a chimpanzee behavior activity. It's ungraded, but it definitely will be on the test, and it'll help you better understand that idea of proximate and ultimate in innate and learned behaviors using the research of Jane Goodall. So it's some really fascinating stuff. There's also some links to documentaries about Jane Goodall. If you've got some time and you've run out of things to watch on Netflix or Hulu or whatever, take some time to watch this documentary about Jane Goodall. And then if you haven't yet, read the updated instructions for physiology. I also provided a new thing here that I put over on the side. I'm still learning how to do this, right? So the Feel Good Photo Gallery, I asked you to share some pictures. These are things that people shared. Great picture of a dog, cool frog, and a baby otter, right? They always make you smile, and good things to think about as you go off to better understand how behavior works. So, good luck getting everything done, and reach out if you need any help. I'll have the office hours 8 to 9:15 in the morning, and then again at 12:30 to 1:45 You can come to either one. Doesn't matter what section you're in. All right. Have a good day.